Everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. Hey, what's poppin', people? How you all doing? Welcome back to Chelsea News with me, your friend Jan. I hope you lot are all doing well, man. I really do hope that. Today we're talking about crisis talks. You know, you really feel at home. It's like putting on an old pair of warm boots, Chelsea being in crisis. You know, you really feel like, oh yeah, this is normal. I recognise this. So Chelsea are apparently having crisis talks today with Frank Lampard and everyone. Better check the whole gang dem. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about why perhaps the club are reluctant to let Frank Lampard go, what he's done well, what they're trying to set up. And yes, due to reports from The Athletic and other news publications, I will be talking about the touted suitors for the case against Frank Lampard, I suppose. Because this is Chelsea news and it's in the news and I've got to talk about it. Settle in, get comfortable, consider subscribing to this YouTube channel if you do enjoy daily CFC content. Bell notifications icon on, of course, and if you want to support me, Jan, who's hurting right now, my friends, please do drop a like. That's very kind of you. And let me tell you that Chelsea News is actually brought to you by OneFootball. That's right, if you are like me, a football nerd that likes to be plugged in to football 24/7, then you have the opportunity to have that via OneFootball, an entirely free application on your phone, iPhone, Android, or on the computer that gives you everything you need updated with the club you love. So, you can achieve this simply by clicking the OneFootball link down in the description and, like me, use the application every day. Alright then, let's get into today's content. We're gonna get through this. So, Frank Lampard's Chelsea lost 2-0 to Leicester last night. You can watch my match review of said game by clicking on the previous upload on this channel. Dismal, disappointing, disenchanting, I'll stop there. Essentially very, very worrying. Now, Chelsea are in a dismal run of form. First and foremost, before I talk about anything else, let's talk about why perhaps Chelsea, Roman Abramovich, Marina Granovskaya and the board are reluctant to can Frank Lampard. Firstly, he did a good job when he came in. No one wanted to take the Chelsea job last season because of the transfer ban, losing Eden Hazard, who contributed to 50% of the Premier League goals. It was a difficult job, especially for any big manager to come in. They didn't want it. They wanted to wait. So Frank Lampard came in, he was the perfect candidate, and he overachieved. We all know the story. Great, he gave 12 to 14 academy debuts, finished level on points with third, got to a cup final, got out of a tough Champions League group. Generally positive stories. Frank Lampard was subsequently nominated for Manager of the Year. He also won a Manager of the Month. So I don't think it's up for debate that he had a good debut season managing Chelsea. Now, the feel-good story developed over the summer when he brought in a lot of good players. They all sort of gave glowing references in terms of their discussions with manager Frank Lampard. More positivity there. And Chelsea started this campaign very well indeed. Lots of people saying Chelsea were in the title race. Jurgen Klopp coming out with his mind game saying Chelsea are favourites for the title. And even just little as 5 weeks ago, journalists and, people in the media were posing the question to Frank, are you going to get a new contract as a reward for this positive run of form, 17 games unbeaten, etc. Little as 5 weeks ago, but a lot changes in a little time in football, and Chelsea have been dismal of late. Now, most other situations, any other manager, they would of course have been sacked. Now, not just because he's Frank Lampard, he hasn't been sacked, but this is what I wanted to talk about. First, how perhaps the club are reluctant to can Lampard because of the setup they've started. Frank Lampard at the helm, the face of the club, who speaks well, who has a good ideas in management, or certainly seemed to up until recently, with Jody Morris and Joe Edwards as his assistants, finally bringing in the academy products into the first team, which is something Roman Abramovich has wanted for his entire Chelsea tenure. It's finally happening, so he was happy with that. Petr Cech instilled as the technical and performance advisor, kind of as part of this extended Lampard team, who did very well in the transfer window as well. Everything seemed perfectly set up. Young management, young technical advisor, a connection to the academy, pretty much what everyone wanted. So they were like, right, no matter what, we'll give this time. We've set this up perfectly. If there is a dip, and we all expect a dip, we're going to sort of sit through the turbulence. So there's that. But ultimately, you know, it can't go on, can it? Listen, man, if Chelsea beat Leicester last night, they'd be 5 points off the top of the Premier League. That is mental. That is like in a title race. In January, if you're 5 points behind the leaders in the Premier League, you're in a title race. That's just what it is, right? And there's a lost difference, but we know that's too reductionist because there's more context required. It's the manner of the performances. It's this Frank Lampard looking devoid of ideas, you know, players looking low on confidence. That's what completes the scenario here. So I wanted to just explain why perhaps Chelsea are reluctant to can Frank Lampard. Look, it might still happen. It could happen today. And if it does happen, I'll report on it, of course. But that's the scenario there. But of course, The Athletic have come out with an article saying Chelsea's next manager most likely will speak German, and that is to get the most out of new signings Kai Havertz and Timo Werner, who respectively are both very talented and have big futures ahead of them in terms of their footballing career. And you know, you can understand that. If Frank Lampard does get fired, you'd hope the likes of Hudson-Odoi and Mason Mount would retain their places in this team. Certainly Mason Mount, because he's been incredible this season. You don't know what's going to happen. But anyway, I want to run through a few coaches that The Athletic have spoken about and give my opinion on them. It's important to note at this point, I'm not conclusive in terms of my opinion. I've got to sort of be objective at this point. I'd understand if they sacked Frank Lampard, but I'd similarly understand if they're wanting to give it time and change something else within the setup to engage a spark. So I'm on the fence. Anyway, first of all, they spoke about Thomas Tuchel. Now, of course, Tuchel is a free agent. He's a German-speaking coach, of course. He speaks fluent English as well. I remember him speaking to BT Sport after Dortmund games, and he speaks fluent English, French, German. A decent coach by all accounts. Really, I can't really judge him by his PSG tenure, and in fact, loads of PSG fans wanted him out, which isn't the best. Doesn't say too much, and they see an upgrade in Pochettino. A little bit worrying, to be honest. I think this would literally be a case of trying to get the most out of Timo and Kai. But for me, not the most inspiring appointment. I wouldn't get too excited over it. But you can understand why perhaps the hierarchy are turning to him. Maybe they'd give him I don't know, if they hired him now, maybe they'd give him an 18-month contract. I'm not so sure. Not so inspiring for me, especially considering, I don't know, he hasn't managed in the Premier League. I know that's ridiculous, but if you bring in someone at this point, you'd want to bring in like a certainty in terms of a class manager. Like, you know, if you could give me any German, I'd probably go for Hansi Flick. Not that he'd come to Chelsea though. Next up, they spoke about Julian Nagelsmann, and apart from dressing like a complete dweeb and looking like a bit of a dork, he's a great coach. Now, personally, I've always been a fan of Julian Nagelsmann ever since he was appointed at Hoffenheim. He was such a young coach. I believe he was appointed as first team coach in the Bundesliga at 28 years old, which is incredible when you think of it like that. I remember I was texting and this was a few years ago as well, I was texting my mate saying, look, you know, this guy is like similar age to us, and he's like managing people that are older than him in his squad in the top division in the Bundesliga. It was really inspiring. So I've always liked him. I'm not sure he's like the finished article yet, and if he could go to a club like Chelsea, it might be a bit too big for him. I know that's funny after Lampard, who's got a very little experience, but if they were to make a shift at this point, it's another progressive thinking young manager without experience to just really push these players up. Although generally I am a fan of Julian Nagelsmann. Forgot his name there! And of course, RB Leipzig, good relationship with Timo Werner. You'd imagine he'd get the best out of him. So that's an interesting one. Now, another one that I wanted to talk about is quite interesting, is Hassan Hill of Southampton. Now, another guy that I was a massive fan of when he first came in to Southampton. You know, the Alpine Klopp, remember that was being banded around, really, really interesting. And when a lot of people were not really speaking about him, I was quite excited about him in terms of his managerial performances early doors, even when they weren't getting results. The way he transformed Southampton looked really, really impressive. And this isn't one of those like blowing my own horns like I knew he was good early doors, but I did really like his work early doors. And obviously he had the bad loss to Leicester and turned it around, so he did well. Is he elite Chelsea level, as in like bringing in someone to quickly fix it? I'm not so sure, but he's shown in the Premier League how they can perform well. He's really likeable, Hassan Hill. He's really likeable in terms of his character. He's passionate, he gets emotional, and I like that. I like that in a coach. And of course, he was at RB Leipzig and knows Timo Werner, and he recently spoke about how to get the best out of Timo Werner. Although Hassan Hill is one of these, like Julian Nagelsmann, he wouldn't come until the summer if Chelsea was able to obtain the coach. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting. Anyway, all these coaches theoretically would get the best out of these two Germans, and that's what The Athletic was speaking about in their article today, written by Simon Johnson and Dominic Fifield. I'd urge you guys to check it out. Me talking about this, giving my opinion, isn't saying Lampard should be sacked immediately, but rather than projecting my own feelings, thoughts and emotions right now, I'm very much looking at the management at Chelsea, and I'm starting to trust Chelsea as a club to do the right thing to win, rather than, you know, me just talking about it. Because if they really do see something with Lampard that they want to continue with, then fair enough, back him, but change something. Something's got to give now, you know, something's got to give. I'm happy for Frank Lampard to stay. I'd understand if Frank Lampard was sacked, but Chelsea need to definitely shake something up, you know. And even if we've changed the goalpost now and say, look, we're going to try and get into some sort of European position, we just need a sort of evolution of the team, then great, see an evolution of the team, but something's got to give because the team looked devoid of confidence. Anyway, that's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If I can speak English, please do consider dropping a like if you want to show your support, subscribe if you're new. Enjoy the football, my friends, and I will see you later.
You ain't so tough with that bad boy tuck. I'ma get it how I'm living, I'ma walk the walk. Outline my lines, I rap through thought. Body bag the verse, outlined in chalk. In my life seen trouble, hustle on the double. Silence on the trigger like my pick got a muzzle. Yo, chick like to guzzle, bad boy stay in trouble. I only love this paper, sorry I don't. I laugh me, baby.